Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Now, before the general election was called, a proxy battle for the future of the Labour Party was played out in the election of the General Secretary of Unite, the union, probably Labour's biggest backer. The incumbent, Len McCluskey, who had put his weight behind Jeremy Corbyn, faced a challenge from Gerard Coyne, who was seen to be the Labour moderate's choice. Gerard Coyne narrowly lost, and this week he was sacked from his Unite position as a regional secretary. He's with me now. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Andrew.
You say you've been the victim of a kangaroo court and a show trial. What do you mean by that?
What I mean is that after 29 years service with the union, I found myself this week dismissed for a trumped-up charge that related to the election but was about nothing that relates directly to my role as a regional secretary. So it showed to me that dissent now cannot be tolerated inside Unite, and actually that's a very, very concerning situation.
Now, the union says you were sacked for misuse of data during the leadership election campaign. You say it's because you had the audacity to challenge Len McCluskey. What's the evidence to support your side?
Well, the Electoral Reform Society, which is the independent body appointed by the union to oversee the election, this week produced a report that said in relation to the data issue, there was no evidence that I breached any rules, no evidence that I breached the election guidance. So actually the union's own independent body has exonerated me this week.
You've said, and I quote you here, it's beyond parody that I, as a 30-year member of the Labour Party, should be accused of harming Unite Labour relations by Len McCluskey's Chief of Staff, Andrew Murray, a member of the Communist Party for 40 years. What do you mean by that?
What I mean is that the investigation that Andrew conducted in the disciplinary process and then the decision that was reached actually shows a much more concerning element about the involvement in the campaign and the election that reflects badly in terms of his position as a member of the Communist Party and the sort of, well, quite frankly, Stalinist approach to the treatment I've received. So actually it was a show trial that I endured recently, and I don't believe that I've received a fair process at all. And
in this, in your words, show trial, did the Unite leadership regard you as an enemy of the proletariat?
I think the truth is that actually they were very keen to see the dissent and the different vision that I'd got for Unite, which was one focused on our members and protecting them in a very difficult set of circumstances. They actually wanted to stamp out that voice that was one that was articulated in a different way for the union to go in the future.
But you had lost, so why did they need to get rid of you?
I'd lost on a very small majority, and actually we believe that there are thousands of Unite members that didn't have the opportunity to vote that they should have done, which is why I'm now mounting a legal challenge to the election result, and we're going to make sure that actually it's rerun and given the opportunity to those members, because I believe they would have voted to support me.
So you think you have a claim in law?
We've put a 10-point claim into the certification officer, which is the overseeing body for trade unions, that has already gone in challenging the result on 10 individual counts as to how it was not properly run in the first place.
Do you have confidence in the certification officer, that process, or do you think you might end up in the High Court on this?
Well, the truth is, if the certification officer doesn't rule in favour of what I think is an incredibly strong case, you have to ask the question, what is the certification officer for? If we're not successful in that, then of course there is the appeal to the High Court, and I will be considering that.
If you're right about how you've been treated, I stress if, because we're not in a position to judge, but if you're right, what does it say about British trade unionism in the 21st century that you can be sacked by your union for standing up to the boss?
Well, the truth is that it's a democracy, and actually I expect to have a robust debate in a democratic election and not to be punished for it. And I did engage in what was quite a interesting debate through the election campaign, but I've also served the union for 29 years, and for most employees, if they'd had that length of service, then some consideration would have also been given to that.
But Len McCluskey has been re-elected leader. Jeremy Corbyn, as we saw in our film, now rules the Labour Party unchallenged. Andrew Murray, who you say mounted the show trial against you, was a key part of Mr Corbyn's election campaign. I mean, it doesn't look like you've lost on all fronts.
The reality is that Jeremy did exceptionally well in the general election. He reached out to new voters, he got young people involved. And it's not about a left or right issue in terms of the party, it's about where the party now goes. My fear is that the way that I've been treated will actually start to give an influence in the Labour movement more generally, in the Labour Party, that starts to look as though purges are acceptable. The truth is, if Labour does that, the electorate will never forgive them for an internal battle rather than being the effective opposition that they need to be.
So are you saying, just to be clear, that what you believe happened to you could happen to other people now in the Labour Party itself?
I think there's a real danger of that. The reality is that the people who were involved at the very top of Unite, that were involved in the disciplinary process with myself, they are significant and influential figures in Labour, and part of my campaign was about the fact that Unite is too intrinsically linked at the top of the Labour Party, and actually what we need to be focusing on is a much stronger industrial agenda for the future.
You've been a member of the Labour Party for 30 years. You've now been dismissed from your job as Regional Secretary, I think in the West Midlands
That's right.
area. Have you heard at all from the Labour leadership on this issue?
I haven't, and the reality is that in terms of the leadership, it would be nice to hear from them, because we lost seats in the West Midlands, we lost significant seats that we should have held on to, where working class votes did not stay with Labour, and it's really important that we reach out to and engage with those communities and make sure that they do support Labour in the future.
Gerard Coyne, thank you for being with us. And if you're watching in the West Midlands, you can see an extended interview with Gerard Coyne a little later in the programme. Now, I'm joined from Leeds by Labour's John Trickett. He's the Shadow Cabinet Office Minister. Mr Trickett, welcome to the programme. Jeremy Corbyn says he wants to unite the party behind him.
Yeah.
So why didn't he use the Shadow Cabinet reshuffle to do just that?
Well, look, the two things. First of all, why would you change a winning team? We did a very good election campaign. Obviously, we didn't quite get over the line. And the Shadow Cabinet as a whole did work really hard to get that result. But there were some vacancies, and those vacancies were used to reach out. And we brought in actually the man who stood against Jeremy not so long ago in quite a tough battle for the leadership. And I think that does show a leader who is reaching out, but also wanting to make sure that he keeps a winning team. I think that's a reasonable decision for him to make.
What do you say to Gerard Coyne, Labour Party member for 30 years, who believes he's now been purged from the Unite Union? He's lost his job, and that could be about to happen to Labour moderates in the party.
There is going to be no purge in the Labour Party. We want everybody together. What's remarkable is that when what so-called coup happened last year, when the PLP turned against Jeremy, our poll rating collapsed. And as soon as the party then reunited for the general election, our poll rating began to increase. That's a lesson for every one of us. I think the lesson's been learnt by all of us, and we're going to work together as a united party moving forward. But what should be clear to everybody is we cannot go back to the Labour Party as it was previously. We have to move forward with Jeremy in the direction which he's now laid out for the party and for the country.
So what do you say to Paul Mason, a supporter of Mr Corbyn, former journalist? He said to Blairites and to Remainers that, quote, if you want a centrist party, this is not going to be it for the next 10 years. If it's really important to you, form your own party. Get on with it. Is he right?
Well, I think I saw a piece on the internet. He did look a bit excitable at that time. Look, what I would say is that the centre of gravity of British politics itself has changed. What was the centre no longer is the centre. And the idea that a country should be run for a few at the expense of the many is one which I think has been largely destroyed in this election campaign. So the centre's moved. The party has recognised where the new centre is. We just simply now need to unite and begin to roll out the changes. There are many still which need to be done on Jeremy's agenda. I say this to the party: give Jeremy and the leadership the tools and he will finish the job. So
those Labour moderates that Mr Corbyn could have brought back into the Shadow Cabinet but didn't, if they want a more centrist, a centre-left Labour Party, they're not going to get it, are they? They should follow Mr Mason's advice.
No, I think that, look, we've listened to many of them in the last few days, repenting of their sins, if you like to put it that way.
That's another matter.
And look, I mean, look, I think that they've recognised that there's new ways of campaigning, completely fresh ideas. We've got to listen to young people and see how they organise. But also our politics has changed as well as a party, and it's worked, it's resonated in the country. And look, Mr. Coyne talked about working class voters. I began writing about the problem with working class voters in 2005 at the height of the Blair years, and the party does have more work to do in those communities and across the country to win the trust of everybody so that we can serve them in government and begin to change our country for the better.
Working class voters swung to the Tories at the last election. Middle class voters went your way.
Look, there's been a problem with working class voters, manual workers for some time. I don't need to be told about that. I've been writing about it for 10 years. I was a building worker for quite a long time. And we've got more to do to win the trust of those people. But we can do it because so many of the proposals we're making will work for those people. And we've got to bring them back in.
Do you back the left-wing move coming up at the Autumn Party Conference to lower the threshold of MPs needed to stand for the leadership?
Well, let's see where we get to. Look, I'm in favour of democratising the Labour Party. We've got all these new members.
Or not?
Well, let's see where we get to when we get.
Well, you must have a view. It's been a long-running debate in the Labour Party. Do you think the threshold for anybody who wants to run for leadership should be cut to 5% of MPs, or don't you?
I'm not going to express a view at the present time. What I will say, though, is that let me just make the point, whenever there's a leadership election, it's important that every tendency within the party is represented on the ballot paper. And a rule which prevents, say, a section of the right or the left or the centre from getting on the ballot paper is a bad rule. So,
well, that's an argument for reducing the threshold.
Well, it's an argument for looking carefully about how we conduct leadership elections, and I think that debate can be had and ought to be had.
Well, John Landsman, who was on our film there, he's a far-left figure, now a key Corbyn player, he said the Corbynite way of doing things is successful. That's a clear signal that if you want to come on board, you join the Corbyn bandwagon, you don't try to change it. That's the way forward for the Labour Party, isn't it?
Well, look, all political parties are coalitions of different points of view, and the Labour Party is too. And I think you test ideas in action. And what happened in the general election showed that the ideas which Jeremy has had are successful. We've doubled our size, more than doubled our size, 600,000 members. 100 odd joined my party in the last few days.
You lost the third election in a row, Mr. Trickett.
We got the highest share of the vote and the largest number of votes cast.
No, you didn't get the highest share of the vote. The Tories got the highest share of the vote.
I haven't finished my sentence. It's quite important to let me finish the sentence that the Labour has received since '97.
You still lost.
And look, we didn't win. Of course we didn't.
No, you lost.
Of course. And that is why I've said to you, we have to work harder to build confidence of people, especially working people, in our politics and the way we're going.
Can I clarify Labour's position on Brexit, or can you clarify it for me? John McDonnell and Jeremy Corbyn have said that Labour's position is to leave membership of the single market. So why have over 50 Labour politicians signed a letter to The Guardian in favour of membership of the single market?
Well, I don't think that's quite exactly where we are. We are taking the view that we need to have access to all of the tariff-free arrangements which exist within the customs union and the single market.
But membership, what's policy on membership?
Again, it's important to let me finish the sentence.
It's important to answer the question. What's your policy on membership?
I'm trying to get to need to give you a full answer, and the full answer is we are not wedded to any particular institutional framework. We're pragmatic about it, and let's see how the negotiations go. So we're not going to say that we have to do one thing or other in terms of institutional relationships. What we have to have is a Brexit which works for jobs and for growth, and also for the protections which working people have. How that comes out in the negotiations remain to be seen.
So, but I was asking for clarification. Is Labour's policy to try to remain members of the single market or not?
Our policy is to secure all of the rights which exist and tariff-free access within the single market and the customs union. We are not saying that a particular institutional form is something we're going to wed ourselves to at this stage. But let's see where the negotiations go.
Are you for or against remaining members of the single market?
Well, I don't think it's simply a question of for or against. It's a question of securing the best possible arrangement for our economy and for working people.
Can I just finally on what's been happening, the Grenfell Tower disaster?
Sure.
Labour MP Clive Lewis, he said or implied that, quote, Thatcherite economic dogma was to blame for Grenfell Tower. We now know that many other tower blocks were clad in the same material by Labour councils. Were they guilty of Thatcherite economic dogma too?
Look, I think this is a great tragedy, isn't it?
Of course.
We're all very, very sad about it. I think it's very difficult to say exactly what happened. I worked in the building industry for years, and I know the regulations were very tight, but it now looks as though something that happened quite very unfortunate with the building regulations. And apart from that, I think we can't say exactly what lies behind all these problems.
But by Tory and Labour councils, that's my point.
Of course. But
both parties have questions to answer.
Of course they do, but the truth is the government are sitting back. They've sat back on the reports of the coroners over the years, which have recommended, for example, retrofitting of sprinkler systems. They've sat on those documents for years. And would that have made a difference?
Do you think all parties should stop trying to make political capital
I'm not trying to make
out of this? No, I wasn't accusing you. But what I'm asking is, do you think all parties should stop trying to make political capital out of what is effectively a national disaster,
of course,
and try to get to the bottom of a systemic failure and try to do better regardless of party?
Of course we should. Everybody should do the same. And the sooner we get the results of the inquiry, the better. But if there are decisions which can be made sooner than the public inquiry, they should be made and implemented.
All right. Mr. Trickett, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.